My name is Daniella Savic. I have joined UNICEF 4 years ago. I can't recall now. But I originally come from the private sector, where I worked at P&G, but also had a few startups in the Middle East. And the reason why I joined UNICEF was really by convictions, because I fell in love with the mandate, and I really wanted to ensure that I could do business for purpose. So that being said, my role is to basically build alliances with the private sector. And I've been working in Geneva, where is the UNICEF HQ for anything related to private sector partnership, but also in New York. And now, since the 20th of August, to be precise, I have moved to the DRC, where my role is basically to ensure that we could connect the global supply chain of cobalt for the moment. And then obviously we would like to extend to other minerals. But yeah, basically to ensure that we could connect all the actors within the global supply chain, and to draft common solutions in order to eliminate child labor in mining. UNICEF is basically following 3 strategies that have been identified by a multi-stakeholder consultation. And those are, one, to legitimate the Congolese cobalt, but also other minerals that we will be working on in the future. So this is very much relevant to your journalism or media context, because again, as UNICEF is a UN agency and we're here to support the local stakeholders, maybe the government, but also the civil society and the private sector. Our role is not to do any bad press or propaganda, but is really to ensure that we can basically work towards common solutions. So this is one. The second thing that we have recognized is that in order to drive positive socio-economical impact, it is important that we formalize the artisanal mining industry in the country, because, well, obviously the economy depends on the mining industry, but this is also where we could have the biggest positive impact in terms of eliminating child labor. And last but not least, UNICEF's role is also to harmonize all the initiatives that are happening within the global supply chain of cobalt, and to ensure that all the stakeholders are working towards common solutions and in a coordinated manner. So with that being said, the important aspect also to highlight is that UNICEF has joined the Global Battery Alliance, whose purpose is to ensure that all the components that we need to have that we need for developing the batteries are basically part of a responsible supply chain. And that goes beyond the DRC, beyond cobalt, but it has 10 principles that are basically meeting the environmental, economical, and social international standards. And one of those 10 principles that the GBA has endorsed, the principle number 8, is eliminating child labor within those global supply chains. So again, why am I saying that? Is that, as a summary, the child labor issue, and may it be in mining, agriculture, or any other sectors, is basically a systemic issue that often occurs from the root cause of poverty. And in order to resolve this Sustainable Development Goal number 1, we really need a collective effort to basically look at what are the solutions that we can incorporate within the supply chain. So very good question. So let me go back to the Global Battery Alliance so that we can understand how it has been created, and maybe it will also help you understand why the Cobalt became so strategic globally. So the Global Battery Alliance has been funded in 2017 at the World Economic Forum in Davos. And it was initiated by the Sustainable Development Goals, but also by the Paris Agreement, the COP21. So what was discussed in the COP21 is that more and more our industry is going to move towards batteries, right? In order to how do you say, move away from anything that is extracted from fossil fuels. But the problem is that in developing or creating those batteries, the supply for the components, the supply chain of all the components need to be responsible. Otherwise, we're just transferring one sustainable issue to another. And this is where Cobalt falls into place, and why it is so strategic, because its demand keeps increasing while we are trying to move away from a fossil fuel economy. But at the same time, its supply chain, and again, it's a global supply chain that we're looking at. It's not, the issue is not only isolated in the DRC, but its supply chain is not really recognized as being responsible. So this is why we're now focusing on Cobalt. But again, in the future, we will also look at the other components to ensure that once we have succeeded in moving from this fossil fuel economy and towards a battery-oriented one, all the supply chains of all those components will be responsible. Again, a very good question. So honestly, and this is personal, but I get the creeps when I keep hearing about these figures of 40,000 children, because it is an outdated issue, an outdated data. But the issue here is that we lack tools for actually really monitoring child labor, but also often the international world does not make the difference between the presence of children in the mines and child labor per se. So, for example, when I went the first time to visit an artisanal mine site, I saw a 3-year-old kid walking around, and I asked his mother, like, if she was aware of the risks that this kid was exposed. And she told me, yes, I am aware, but one, he's not working, but two, I have no one else to leave him. So, and this is the issue basically, is that we only look at child labor, but we often lack the analysis of why is that happening, and why, and what is the difference, why children are actually present in those mine sites. So yeah, it's a big work that UNICEF has done in the DRC, but basically we have understood that first of all, we need to ensure that those mining communities have access to basic social services, and may it be a day nursery care system, but also obviously primary and secondary education, but also vaccination, nutrition. We also look at how we can increase the access to drinkable water, but also at birth registrations. And why do I want to focus now on birth registration is that it may sound unrealistic, because we in the developed countries, we have established systems, but here you have a lot of people who do not have an identity, who have never been registered. So how do you want the the international community to monitor child labor if the children that we find, or the people that we find on those mines, do not know when they were born, do not know where we don't have any identification or referral system to basically track if it is child labor or if it is something else. And this is why I was saying that the child labor issue is very systematic, and we need to always go back to what are the root causes in order to resolve it. Because simply taking a child out of a mine won't resolve the issue. Well, I would say, and thanks, that's a very nice question. But obviously, I would say if we can basically change the narrative around Cobalt, first of all, and stop pointing fingers at the DRC stakeholders, but rather mobilize all our resources. When I'm mentioning resources, it's not only financial. I'm talking about expertise, technology, name it, communication channels. But really, if we could mobilize a collective effort to resolve this issue with a solution-oriented mindset, that would be already the biggest win.